Welcome to the DPW podcast, live here in Amsterdam. And I'm your host, Bernhard Raschke, and I have the pleasure to welcome Mauro Erriquez.
Correct.
Is that a good pronunciation?
Perfect.
And I've learned it's a Spanish name.
Correct.
Enrico, you're partner with McKinsey, senior partner, and you've also been a key contributor to a book that you've recently published, Reimagining Procurement. But before we go there, why don't you just introduce yourself and say a couple of words about what McKinsey does in procurement, not an area that most people associate you with.
Very good, and thank you, Bernhard, to have me here today, and really looking forward to our discussion. Mauro Erriquez, as you said, is my name. I'm actually Italian. My last name is Spanish, but we don't know why. And I have now more than 20 years experience in procurement. Started my career in procurement before joining McKinsey. I was first at Fiat and then General Motors Europe. Started as an engineer doing supplier development and then became a buyer, then a commodity leader, and then joined McKinsey 90 years ago. I'm now leading globally our practice, both in procurement and product development. And that's one of the things that many people don't know about us and our capabilities. McKinsey procurement and product development actually makes up almost to 10% of our overall global business. So it's quite a sizable chunk if you think how many capabilities we have. We are present across all continents and we have around 2,000 consultants around the world. What we do is transformation. We love improving performance, but also improving what we call health, so how companies and the procurement and product development function work, and the operating model and the talent behind it.
Very good. That in itself is a very rich set of topics. And I just have to give you a little anecdote because I used to be a management consultant at A.T. Kearney, and we were seen at some point in time to be the market leader. But the criteria matrix that we used for our sourcing strategy was done by a McKinsey partner, which we never wanted to admit. So that's my little...
Yeah, that's true. And actually it's fun because also we are very shy on telling that, but Kraljic invented basically through that the strategic supplier management as we know today. When he was at McKinsey, he was a partner or a senior partner, but we never associated like our other market colleagues do with a BCG matrix. We never did a McKinsey matrix in procurement. Maybe next time.
Well, it was a very useful tool, and I think it's what happens when you put a strategy mind to an operations problem, and I think that's what we would like maybe to explore a bit. Now tell us, you've just co-written this book, Reimagining Procurement. So why now? And who's the audience for this book?
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, the idea of the book came with a combination of a couple of discussions. Point number one, you may know we have a unit called McKinsey Global Institute. It's basically a think tank in macroeconomics mostly. It's one of the largest privately owned, and we do a lot of macroeconomics basic research. And while discussing with some of my colleagues there, we realized that the world is changing in such a way that really the context, the economical context that we know and that has been there for the last 20 years is going to change. And we see, every day that's happening. And therefore then, while discussing this with some of our clients, they were asking, okay, but what does it mean now for me? What does it mean that for procurement? And that sparked a bit the idea. So that's how it came. And why now? Because I think we all realize that there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges that the procurement professional are facing. And we would like to help pushing the boundaries of procurement for the next 20 years.
Wonderful. Now, in the context of, let's say, today's challenges, the words volatility, sustainability come up, and yet, right, most CPOs are measured on savings. So with this backdrop in mind, who are you targeting? Is it the CPO or is it educating the CEO?
Look, I think it's actually both. I think for the CPO, we are trying to give a bit of a guide, but at quite high level, where actually procurement need to go. And that will require really a lot of leadership by the CPO, him or herself, because it requires a lot of change from talent to technology, but also to the playing field procurement plays into. Now, talking, however, about the playing field, clearly that can only happen if the CPO and the procurement function as a whole has a mandate where they can actually play in a larger field.
Right. Now that's I think, very important point you've just made. Just before we explore a little bit how the CPO could do this, if you had to summarize the book in kind of 2-3 sentences, what is the thrust or the storyline of the book?
The plot. I don't want to spoil it fully. No, I'm joking. Look, if you take a step back, I work a lot also with private equity clients, and they are really obsessed about the strategy and how to win with their businesses. And that's what we are trying to answer with our book. Is basically where to play in procurement and how to win. So we are both giving a bit of some ideas for where procurement can focus to generate value, but also what to do in order to win there. So, and if you like, the plot is as follows. We think that on one side, procurement need to rethink the way they approach value generation and really think themselves about being spend entrepreneur that can manage not only the immediate supply chain upstream, but the whole value chain, both upstream and downstream. Sounds revolutionary, but there are already companies moving in that direction. Second, we think, and that's, if you like, changing the playing field. Then the second point is changing the rule of the games, which means procurement need to find new venues of value generation, and all of the challenges that everybody of us is facing today are challenges, but at the same time opportunities. And we think there are some specific opportunities they can capture. And we conclude the book saying, that sounds good, but in reality that only can happen, can only be translated into something real if the way of working of procurement, the operating model, the talent is completely changing.
Okay, let me see if I got that. So they say three things. So the first thing that needs to happen is to see the function as an entrepreneur that creates value. So that's a mindset shift and a recognition of the value it can create across the whole value chain is what you're saying. The second point you've been making is there are new venues for value creation, and you can take advantage from the volatility and the sustainability challenges coming. So that is a big point. And the third one is the operating model and the talent, right? The people behind it. Well, why don't we do double click on each of those areas? So give me maybe an example, upstream, supply chain. What is it you expect the CPO now to do to capture that value?
Thank you. Look, if you look, I like a lot looking into history to see parallels with the future. And if you look where procurement is coming from, basically procurement as we know today started basically in the 70s, in the 60s and the 70s. One company that really did a strong investment into the function was actually Toyota. With their Toyota production system, there is an area about sourcing and collaboration with supplier and so on and so on. And at that time, that was one macroeconomic era after basically the Bretton Woods system, so dollar and gold were not coupled anymore, stagflation coming, oil crisis. At that time, procurement was basically there to increase and build the businesses and build supply chain across the world. That was what happened in the past. And then later on, the era of globalization, which is the era that basically is ending now, started. Therefore, all of us, when I was in procurement 20 years ago, and most of the companies out there were using globalization and advancing technology, but above all in production technologies, as the two main drivers of productivity. And productivity means cost, optimization means saving. Now, if this is going to change, and we believe it's going to change in the future, then it means that also procurement need to change the rule of the game again. And if I make an example in upstream, we have done a study and you see that the value pools are shifting again dramatically between upstream and downstream and between hardware and software. So most of the companies are approaching the market in the same mental framework of this is my company and I'm reaching out to supplier. But we think that actually this needs to be challenged dramatically, and therefore the procurement function, the buyer and commodity manager should first think, is actually sourcing the right answer, or should we think about different way of capturing this value pool, which could mean deploying capital, could be building business together, could be many other things. And that's where end-to-end spend entrepreneurship, who knows better the market than the buyers? Actually nobody in a company. Even the strategy department don't have typically the understanding at granular level of market like the whole procurement organization does. And we think procurement should leverage that.
Very interesting. So in order to be able to do this, I guess one of the challenges is that most CPOs are being measured pretty one-dimensional, right? And we're talking about the good old savings, the spend cube, baseline. What you described looks like another level. And how would you suggest a CPO deals with that? You know, if you're looking at decarbonizing part of your supply chain through joint venture, and there is a cost and cash pressure, how do you reconcile?
That's why, I mentioned before, I work a lot with private equity companies, and that's why I think also the way procurement is incentivized and the performance of procurement is defined and measured should change, because cost savings are far too unidimensional. And later today on stage, a small spoiler alert, I'm also going to do a bit of a provocation and saying, long live cost avoidance. Now, everybody was saying, wait a second, cost avoidance, this is bad. Every CFO saying, we are not going to measure it. But in a volatile world, if my organization is able to get better contractual condition than the average competitor, even if the price is increasing, and I can pass that to my customers, that's real value. And that's why I think, for the future, we would strongly recommend not to measure procurement on savings, but really about talking about margin. And margin, both for services and product, can be measured. It requires quite a lot of a different way of calculating it and analyzing them. But margin really, I think, exemplify the value that procurement can create in the future.
It's not new, right, that procurement has the ambition of looking at ecosystem configuration. I remember these terms being floated, but they were at the time maybe buzzwords. But what's different now? And I ask that also in the context here of this network. The theme is put AI to work. So is AI a key enabler, or is it even a distraction at this stage? What is it?
I think there are two answers to your question. Why now, and why do you think that this time is going to happen? Point number one, we are entering, that's what we believe, a new macroeconomic area. So whether you want or not, the whole world is going to work differently. And the two main areas, the two main drivers which have drove basically the underlying productivity which procurement was tasked to capture is going to be different. I'm not saying it's not going to be there, because AI is a clear productivity driver, but it's going to be dramatically different. Therefore, whether you want or not as a procurement organization, you have to change. The second point to your question on AI is for us a foundational technology shift, like internet has been done, like cloud computing and mobile has been done. So it's very different than robotic process automation, RPA, blockchain, which were far more narrow technology. AI is far more foundational, and therefore this will act as a catalyst for different productivity level, strong push to basically digitalization and software-based business model, which again procurement should tap into as a way to create value. Not savings, but margins.
So if I understand you correctly, then AI is an enabler. It's not an end, right? It's the end is really the value creation, but also through the external pressures, looking at sustainability, which won't go away, it could help. Now, the question goes then from the why and the what to the how. And that's where most of the discussion I'm having with CPOs here at this event become a little bit more unclear. So how would you approach it? And you mentioned operating model. Is that the lever? Where would you go?
That's a very good question, and to be honest, I think there is not one answer to it. At least we don't pretend to have the one answer that fits all situations. Above all, if we are looking at a procurement function versus looking at an overall company. So therefore, if I add a little bit of color on what I'm saying, point number one, clearly, the overall strategy of the business, the overall company is very important, and set, if we like or not, as procurement professional, set a bit the context in which you can act. However, we do think that procurement can actually be the front runner in many situations to actually leverage AI to really create value. Analysis, you probably heard it many times, many consultants, including McKinsey, have studied digital transformation. 70% of the time they don't deliver the value. This number has increased. There is a famous study of MIT recently saying the number has increased to 95% of companies driving Gen AI and AI transformation today fail. Now, the 5%, I think, in this 5% actually of companies which are successful, procurement can play a very, very important role. Why? Point number one, there is real value out there. Most of your suppliers are going to use AI as a huge productivity lever, clearly in the service area, but also to less extent, but also in the industrial area. So procurement can actually play a role in capturing these, like in the past, the efficiency through the advantage of internet did. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think AI is going to change a lot how procurement can work, because it's a way to create and improve effectiveness more than efficiency. By the way, I think it's both, but the focus should be far more on effectiveness. Therefore, I'm not giving really you the answer on the how, but we see an area, we see a path where procurement is leading the path and taking probably more risk than they have been doing in the past.
Fascinating. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that given all these pressures and giving also the pressure on companies to leverage AI effectively, procurement could be the spearhead to link it to value creation, and therefore the deployment would come up and it would create real value downstream. And some people say this is the last generation of leaders who do not have a hybrid workforce. So in the future we might have our agentic AI working with us, and then who do you blame? The person who works with the agent or the AI? So I'm thinking now this needs a different way of deploying talent, in fact attracting talent. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the requirements of those people, because talent will be needed to do all these difficult things.
I was this morning at a breakfast which hosted by the Goldman Sachs tech fund, and it was about revolution procurement. And one of the answers to that question was, who do you hire? I think now is the moment to actually hire for people which are bringing tech capabilities into procurement, more than actually understanding and deep expertise into a specific market. And the reason is that through AI, expertise is being socialized. Everybody can access expertise, while tech expertise, while also being socialized and democratized by AI, still you need to understand today and probably for the next 10 years how to build those agents.
Fascinating. So what you're saying is it's less now about buying people with particular experience and knowledge, but people that are willing to deploy technology, know how to deploy it, and bring curiosity, I would also probably add to it, and they can learn about procurement and therefore deploy these technologies to business problems out there. Is it a war for talent? What do you observe?
That's going to be probably the most difficult part. Is anyway, in many parts of the world, we have reached peak population, even including migration. If you take out migration, even more, and therefore it's going to be intrinsically more difficult to get talent. And the war for talent is going to be across sectors and across function for talent with tech background. And that's where I think this is really a CPO task, a CPO priority to attract this kind of people. And we did a fun game last year in a similar conference. We pulled out job description of many of the companies which were attending it. If you still see, I didn't do it today, but last year, if you look at average talent that the company were searching, we were still in the previous era. So commodity expertise, engineering background, this kind of things, or business background.
Well, that requires a real mindset shift in terms of the type of people, and also then being willing to invest obviously in them and educating them around procurement. But you need to attract them in the first instance. What is it with the generation of future leaders now that in your view needs to be offered so that they're willing to engage with this company over another company?
If I look at what we are doing as McKinsey, in order also to attract this kind of profile, is giving them room to develop. Is giving also room to achieve and apply and test out the new things. Most of new generation while the ones that are coming now to the workforce are not born with AI, but they are really using it far more than probably people of our age. And therefore, really being credible and creating an environment where these people, this talent can thrive, I think is the most important thing. The second most important thing, in my opinion, is being credible. If you are in the interviews not even talking about the topic or just using buzzword, versus having at least a basic or even better a deep understanding of actually what AI means for the processes, which revolution is going to bring, and the role that the new talent can bring, without this deep understanding that creates credibility, I think it's going to be difficult to be attractive for talent which is not the typical procurement talent.
That's an interesting one, because that means that the leaders in the function need to upskill and show that they're curious and have credibility, and they understand the challenges, so to attract people that really want to make a difference. And do you think the procurement function on average is AI fluent?
I don't know. To be very honest, I mean, if I look at the organization I'm working with, I've seen some which are really pushing really hard, and basically everybody is using not only the co-pilot of this world and ChatGPT, but also experimenting with some or many of the companies which are today. And I do definitely see others which are, if you like, positioning AI as it's a buzzword, it's a bubble, it will go away, and I just continue doing what I'm doing.
Very good. So Mauro, just to starting to wrap this up, let's come back to the book. So there were the three areas you mentioned: the end-to-end value entrepreneur, taking advantage, and value from volatility and sustainability, deploying the right tools. But in order to achieve that, you need the operating model of the future. And we talked about AI being one of the major influences. Anything else? Agility versus resilience, is that a topic to be looked at?
I think resilience is going to be again a table stake, like it was, if you like, in the 50s and the 60s, where Ford and all the other were actually developing supply chain globally. Now I think the leader of the future needs to develop resilient supply chain, because supply chain distress is going to be there, and it's a very well researched human behavior that when something bad happens, the human typically take care of it for 1 year to 18 months, and then most of the people go back to the normal behavior before the event happens. We do see that also in organization. Therefore, we think that the leader of the future, those are the ones that have, in our analysis, 9 times total return on shareholder in a period of 10 years, are the ones which are putting resilience really not only as tick in the box exercise, but really as a core element on their function. And the second point which we end the book with is leadership. This is really the time of leaders, the CPOs out there, to really pave the way and really try stuff out that feel uncomfortable and new, that nobody else has tried before.
Right. So it looks like the CPO agenda has just gotten bigger, the expectation higher. There's a discrepancy, I think we see still between the ambition and some of the capabilities and the understanding, let's say, of the CEO and other stakeholders of what's needed. Now, how's your book going to help the reader? If there's if someone read the book, what would they enable them to do differently they haven't done yet?
There are 2 reactions if you read our book. Reaction number 1, you are stressed out and you say, look, McKinsey again is telling us and a lot of stuff that we need to do. I hope that's not going to be often the case. We actually hope that we give a bit of a framework, of thinking or designing the answer on where to play and how to win. We are not trying to give handbook that is like fully written out, but giving inspiration on the direction to go, and bringing examples of companies which are doing elements of this transformation already today as a source of more concrete inspiration. So I hope that the reaction is, after reading a book, being inspired, going back to the organization, to the rest of the management, and coming up with an ambitious vision for the next 10 to 20 years.
Very good. And is the book out? When is it?
It's going to come out in the next couple of months, ready for a Christmas present.
Wonderful. So I'm sure we'll all be looking forward to that. My final question: if you had to give one piece of advice to a future leader, has the ambition to become a CPO, what would you advise them?
The one word I would use is curiosity. This is the time where everybody needs to put him or herself back to the school bench and learn.
Wonderful. I couldn't agree more. I'm very passionate about that particular angle, mindset shift. With that, I'd like to thank you, Mauro. I'd like to bring this podcast to an end. I think we had a wonderful, broad discussion, plenty of opportunity for people to have great careers, and the problems are big and need to be solved. So thank you, Mauro.
Thank you, Bernhard.